Hello, and welcome to this HTAi Interest Group webinar, The Role of Generative AI in Search Strategy Development. As we wait a few moments for further participants to join, I will share a few slides with you about the Society. HTAi membership holds many benefits, including HTAi's premier events and specialized interest groups, free online access to HTAc, the International Journal of Technology Assessment in Healthcare, HTAi resources and news, including e-newsletters, bulletins, and international developments in HTA, full access to the HTAi Educational Offers database, an international network of HTA experts, innovators, and influencers, a community that's dreaming, shaping, and championing the future of HTA. For more information on membership benefits, visit our membership pages on our website. HTAi interest groups are open to all members of HTAi. They act as a forum for HTAi members to network, exchange information, and collaborate on projects of mutual interest throughout the year. Visit the HTAi website for more information on our interest groups. The next HTAi 2025 annual meeting will take place in Buenos Aires, Argentina, from June the 14th to the 18th. For more information, please visit the event website, www.htai2025.org. Finally, we kindly ask participants to remain muted until invited to ask questions. Alternatively, please submit any questions through the Q&A function on the Zoom meeting platform. Thank you again for joining us today. I will now hand over to Amanda Hodgson, the chair of the HTAi Information Retrieval Interest Group, to formally welcome and introduce today's topic.
Thank you very much. The Information Retrieval Special Interest Group with HTAi welcomes all HTAi members who are interested in literature searching as a foundational building block of HTA, and who want to learn more about the latest trends and technologies advancing evidence-based search techniques. Our topic today is the role of generative AI in search strategy development, in particular, the potential and limitations of ChatGPT's capabilities in streamlining the literature search process. Our speaker today is Lisa Chosfold. Lisa is a faculty engagement librarian at the University of Alberta's Jeffrey and Robin Sperber Health Sciences Library in Edmonton, Canada. Over her career, Lisa has contributed to numerous systematic reviews and health technology assessments that have informed healthcare practices, policies, and initiatives across various health domains. Her current research focuses on exploring the integration of artificial intelligence to enhance literature searching processes. Lisa is also a member of the IRG Steering Committee, and I'm very pleased to introduce her today. Before we begin, I'd like to remind our audience that there is a Q&A feature we'll be using for questions at the end of Lisa's presentation. I'd also like to thank Nabiyu Mangesti, the IRG Technical Officer, Denise Jarrett, and Nicola Vicari from HTAi for making today's event possible. So without further ado, over to you, Lisa.
Great, thank you very much, Amanda. I'm just going to pull up my slides here. Okay, can everyone see that? All right. So hi, everyone. Amanda has introduced me already, but I'll just pronounce my name one more time for those of you who might not be familiar with it. My name is Lisa Chosfold, and I'm a health sciences librarian from the University of Alberta Library in Canada. And I'm very excited to be presenting today to you. So hopefully you can learn some good tips and tricks on how to use generative AI, and more specifically, ChatGPT. So our session objectives, ultimately, we want to explore the capabilities and limitations of AI in general, but also in the context of systematic search strategy development. And I do want to make a disclaimer. I am not an expert in artificial intelligence. I've done my best to provide an overview and show you what I have learned. And the information I'm presenting is from studies and materials from between May and July 2024. So just so you're aware of that, there may have been incremental changes since that time. But this can also be a time that we can learn from each other if others have more information than I do on a certain topic. So our outline will be, we're going to have a just brief overview of generative AI. Then we will look at generative AI and systematic searching. We'll take a quick peek at other generative AI tools and have a little question section. And I've also included at the end of the slides some tools and activities to try on your own after the workshop that may be of interest. So we're going to first start with an audience poll, and that is, what AI tools have you tried? So you can either click on this link if you're able to cut and paste, or you can join us at menti.com and use the code 95934825. Just pull that up. Oh, interesting. I always learn new tools when I ask this question. I haven't heard of Kenius before. Complexity, Gemini, GenSpark. Oh, Notebook LM. Liner. Wow. Okay, we'll give you one more minute and then we'll move on, but it's just good to see how familiar participants are, just so we, it could be some of you may actually know more than you think about some of these tools. Wow. DeepL, Notebook LM, Pico Portal. Okay, that's fabulous. Thank you, everyone. You can keep adding, and we can share the results with you after, but just so you also have a list of all the potential tools that are out there. So that's really great. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for your participation in that. And we will continue. Okay, so I'm going to just give you a little overview of generative AI for those of you who haven't actually been at all familiar with it. I'm sure some of you, everyone has varying degrees of understanding. But I think many of us have actually been using AI in our lives, and it is an umbrella term for any theory, computer system, or software that's developed to allow machines to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. And sometimes when we talk about AI, there are many different facets of that, and we can break them down into these three main stages. So stage one is kind of very early stage AI. We call that machine learning or artificial narrow intelligence. And this is where computer science in one area, we use it to solve a specific problem. And we're already seeing this in things like Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, and those kinds of tools. And then when the AI gets developed further, we move on to stage two, which is called machine intelligence or artificial general intelligence. And this is where the computer is generalized to solve problems as well as any human. So under further refinement, the AI is getting really advanced and moves on to stage three, called machine consciousness or artificial superintelligence. And this is where we're getting kind of Terminator vibes, Black Mirror type of situation where the computer's intellect is much smarter than the best humans in the field. So having introduced you to those stages, I have another poll for you, and that is, at what stage do you think ChatGPT is at? Stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3? And I'll just move it to the next slide here. Yeah, so we're getting some good responses. I'll give you like 10 more seconds. Okay, looks like most people have submitted if they're going to. Okay, thanks very much for participating. It looks like the majority of you think ChatGPT is at stage 2, but the actual answer is ChatGPT is still at stage 1 because it is not specialized to solve one problem, or it's not able to complete tasks better than humans. We're just not quite there yet, so don't worry about Terminator vibes or any of that coming soon. And you'll maybe see why once we look into what it actually is. So let's just go back into the slides. Okay, so we're still in fairly early days here. These are some of the major tech players in this space, and it's important for you to be aware of the companies involved in developing these kinds of technologies. And in the interest of time, we're really going to be focusing on ChatGPT. And it's good to be aware that ChatGPT is developed by the company OpenAI. You'll also see Microsoft listed here because it has a majority stake in OpenAI, which is why we've been hearing all about it in the news. And so here you can see the connections between all of these companies. Now let's talk about some definitions and terminology so we have a better understanding of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. So the first definition for you to be aware of is natural language processing. This is a type of AI where the computers can support and manipulate human language. So they're really trying to build in the linguistics piece. So we can get the computers to do some advanced things for us. Some examples are machine translation, spell check, Google autocomplete, like when you're searching in Google, your phones when you're typing something in and it predicts the next word for you. That's considered natural language processing. And it's also adapting to your specific needs based on your history. Then we look at large language models. LLMs are essentially natural language processing times 1,000. So, or thousands. So the large language models can perform a variety of natural language processing tasks. It looks like it understands the nuances of language, and that's where we get kind of freaked out a little bit, thinking the computer is sentient. Does it actually understand what I'm saying? Well, stay tuned and you'll find out if that's true or not. The final definition, generative AI, is kind of an umbrella term that is describing any type of AI system using those large language models as the engine that runs it. So for example, we're seeing lots of tools that can generate text or even images or other media in response to how we're typing in the prompts. So that kind of generative AI, or broader umbrella term to describe these kinds of tools, is the umbrella term to describe these types of tools. So in order to look at large language models, we need to look a little bit more closely, but also take a step back. So large language models are using statistical models to analyze huge amounts of data. They're learning the patterns and connections between the words and phrases. So they're learning about grammatical structure in a really mathematical way so that it can calculate the probability of the next word or sequence of words. And how they're doing this is creating tokens which are mapping text to numbers. So you can see this example here. They are color coding the different types of tokens and assigning tokens to common words or phrases in the English language, which is the one that most of us are familiar with. So how are these large language models made? Well, the first step is that they collect vast amounts of data. And so you can see on this table, there are 5 main data sets going into GPT, and each training set was given a weighting used to calculate the probability of what that next word should be in the sentence. So let's look at the first one, Common Crawl. Common Crawl is essentially internet data or Google through mid-2021. So you can see that more than half of ChatGPT is based on information from the internet. But we can also say the Common Crawl is analogous to Google, so it's crawling whatever it can scan on the web, and they're also indexing it. These bots are scanning information on the internet and storing this data, and they're also taking a look at all the links, and that is like taking them through all of these different rabbit holes on the internet. And they're also saving and collecting the metadata behind those websites. So the next data set is web text 2. These are web pages that have been shared in Reddit posts that have received at least 3 upvotes. The next data sets you see are books 1 and books 2. So they have a collection of books that are feeding into the training data set, but OpenAI did not disclose exactly what the book titles are and from where those two main book data sets came. And of course, they're pulling things from Wikipedia. So you can see here's the data set, overall data set to train ChatGPT. And if you look at the box on the right, you can see that OpenAI has revised those different iterations of their chatbot. So when they first developed ChatGPT, it was developed in 2018. They've been improving and enhancing their tool. So now this is the data set for GPT-3. And the public free version of ChatGPT is based off of 3.5. Now for the paid version, ChatGPT Plus, they use GPT-4 for that, and GPT-4o, but they do not really disclose to the public what ChatGPT-4 was trained on. So, and I don't know if anyone here might know that. So that is the training data. So now that ChatGPT has the training data, it now transforms that data into tokens. So remember, we're trying to put text into numbers so that it can do all these fancy mathematical calculations in the back. So they're going to let the tool do its own learning. This is what's called supervised learning. And basically, ChatGPT takes that vast amounts of data, trying to identify the patterns of how language is formed, and it's going to do a lot of this unsupervised learning and then some fine-tuning. Then it's going to the humans who are going to ask ChatGPT to perform some new tasks, more guidelines after it does some reinforcement learning now with humans so that the rating responses based on the responses by ChatGPT will improve. After the reinforcement learning, they're ready to deploy it to the public. So again, the free version is based off of ChatGPT or GPT 3.5, and the paid version is GPT-4. So in my examples I'll be using later today, I'll be using GPT-4, the paid version, so you have a sense of some of the best capabilities of ChatGPT. And who are the reinforcement learning humans? Some could be staff from OpenAI, or they're outsourcing to a third party, but we're not sure always who those people are. So be cautious when using ChatGPT because it's not clear who's doing this reinforcement learning. So what ChatGPT, I need more coffee. What ChatGPT is doing is basic text prediction. It's predicting what that next word should be as it's providing that response to us. So we have a sentence here. Students studied in the and blank, and GPT is going through all of the tokens in their data set to see what is the most probable word that should end this sentence. So library seems like the most plausible word. Water park, maybe, but very unlikely. So ChatGPT will say the student studied in the library because that's the most probable word. So now that you have some understanding of this word probability calculation that it's doing on the back end, you can see how these systems can extrapolate to like sentence paragraphs and full-fledged essays. Essentially, it's like ChatGPT and other generative AI tools are like a calculator, but for words. So these are really fancy calculators where you, just like a calculator itself, if you were to put in 2 + 3, you would get the correct answer. You would get 5, but the calculator doesn't actually understand what 5 is. So the same thing applies to these large language models. So they don't know what you're saying when they're responding to you. It's simply a super sophisticated parrot that can return sequences of words back to you that actually make sense. So when we're typing in a prompt or question and it returns something really quick, for example, what sort of spices should I use? Oh, you should use black pepper and thyme. You're thinking, oh, wow, this is like speaking to a human. It actually does understand what I'm saying. So this seems really amazing, but what's happening in the back end is very fancy math, calculating these probabilities. And so understanding how this actually works helps you kind of take it with a bit more of a grain of salt when you're actually viewing the information. So with these large language models, there are a number of tools out there, and we've been hearing about, well, I have been hearing about grounded versus ungrounded. And it is important to know the difference because what you get in response could be based on whether this tool is grounded or ungrounded. So grounded connects the model to an external source of knowledge, and it produces outputs based on specific real-world data. So it typically is in real time and searching the web or internet in real time, whereas ungrounded relies on its training data and it generates outputs without strict adherence to factual data. So it's good to understand this difference. So if we look at some of the major tools, ChatGPT 3.5 is ungrounded. So it is using an existing training data set that stopped in 2020, I believe it was January 2022. And whereas the grounded programs are searching either later data sets with some supplementary web searching in real time. So it's important to know this difference especially when you're looking for information on a topic. So what does ChatGPT stand for? Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So ChatGPT is essentially an AI chatbot where we can engage in human-like conversation by posing questions or prompts into the ChatGPT website, and it will return a response within seconds. It was launched for the public in November of 2022, and then in March of 2023, they released a paid subscription version. One thing that I've discovered is when you look at the different models, you can see the knowledge cutoff date. So this is where there's you can see the effect of the groundedness, ungrounded, I mean, in that the data set that you are searching when you're searching the latest version even is still a year old. And that is the one for $20 a month. And then the free version, you're getting data back to 2022. So it's still it's not reliable for current information. So in order to capitalize on how to use ChatGPT and many of these generative AI tools effectively, it's really important to know something about prompt generation, or prompt engineering is another term that you may have heard of. So we're going to do another audience poll. How many of you are familiar with this concept of prompt engineering? I'll just pull the... Okay. It looks like people have at least heard of it, but there's some who've never heard of this term. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. It seems like more of you are a bit less or not familiar at all. I'll just give you a couple more seconds. Okay. Okay, so it definitely, oh, there was someone that is a bit more, but it definitely, the trend is that more of you you're less familiar than extremely familiar with prompt engineering. Okay. Okay, thank you for your participation in the poll. And we can look at the results after. I can send those to you. So prompt engineering is essentially about asking the right question or giving a very precise instruction to generate the most useful information. It is the art and craft of prompts for eliciting the desired response. And it is fast becoming an essential skill to be a really good prompt engineer. In fact, this could become like a profession in and of itself. So we're going to take some time here to learn about how we can write really good prompts. And apparently companies are even starting to hire prompt engineers for, queries of computer systems. So, okay. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place here. So we're going to look at some tips on how we can write really good prompts. And we're going to use the CLEAR framework in order to develop these prompts. CLEAR standing for concise, logical, explicit, adaptive, and reflective. So let's go into this framework. So concise. So we want to be very specific when we're creating a prompt. When you're writing prompts, you want to use very simple language. Don't be overcomplicated, and don't provide a lot of background or flowery information. You just want to include the most critical information. So instead of what causes sleep disorders, as an example, you might want to say something a little bit more specific, like list the 3 top causes of insomnia in adults. So you can see the difference in these prompts. The first one, you get what causes sleep disorders. You get very kind of general results. And this might be just for like someone that's just looking for general information, like an individual at home, or sort of a consumer patient individual. And then the second one lists the 3 top causes of insomnia in adults. It gives you a much more detailed description for each. And it's given you, it's explicitly stated you want the 3. And so then it's listing those, which may or may not be the top 3, but at least you've got some specific reasons. So the next step is you want to make sure your prompt is logical. So maybe you want to learn more about sleep disorders, but you're not going to ask all of these questions at once. You're going to bring them down to bite-sized chunks and enter them in one at a time. And we have to be cautious here because, again, it's not intelligent. It doesn't know what we're saying. So the words returning to us, it doesn't understand those. So it's doing calculations in the back. So don't overwhelm it with too much information. So we want to be logical and structure the information in a logical flow. You want to establish the context and relationship and really avoid too many instructions. So some example prompts that you could ask would be, tell me about sleep disorders. Are there sleep disorders that are more common? What types of therapy help with sleep? Tell me about alternative therapies. Explain the significance of alternative therapies, or let's talk about the budget. So that none of them are overly wordy. They're pretty simple and they're following up on the previous prompt. You also want to be explicit. So you want to define the instructions. You want to tell ChatGPT what to do. So, for example, the example prompt, could you explain the following passage? So it's a very sophisticated passage, and you're having ChatGPT simplify it a little bit. But you want to set a reading level or output format. So instead of how do I apply for a CIHR grant, you might go with something like, please tell me how to apply for and spell out the meaning of CIHR. Please limit your answer to 5 points and tell it to me like I'm a high school student. So very, very explicit. And you could also ask it for a summary of code for those in computing science and other output formats that you can ask it in this blue box. So you could say that I would like it in a table format. I'd like a numbered list. I'd like it code for this particular program. I'd like it in a Q&A. So be as clear as possible and explicit as possible for your output formats. And then assign a role for ChatGPT to play. So example prompt 1 is, you are a research librarian conducting a systematic search on melatonin as treatment for sleep disorders. Using the PICO model, what search concepts could be used? Or imagine you're a public health decision maker dealing with a social media crisis. Draft a press release that acknowledges the issue, explains what actions your health department is taking, and reassures the public. So these are very specific and explicit. So here is an example of asking or saying a prompt, you are a research librarian conducting a systematic search using the PICO model. So it describes what the PICO is, and then using those PICO elements, it provides some terminology and then a search string, but still not quite there yet. The next is adaptive when you're doing prompts. So you may need to rephrase, you may need to have follow-up questions. So if you're not getting enough synonyms, for example, for sleep disorders, are there any additional synonyms for sleep disorders that could be included in the search? Can you provide more synonyms for melatonin in the same way you did for sleep disorders? Can you adjust the search string to provide only the population terms and intervention terms? And so you see here, it's created this search string. So you just got to keep prompting it. Now the danger here though is when you are doing prompts in ChatGPT, will it ever be wrong? Well, yeah. You definitely want to take what it offers you with a grain of salt. So many people, think ChatGPT is super amazing. It could never be wrong. It is confidently incorrect quite often. And it's that confidence that what it displays with that can be very misleading. It has this authoritative tone. So be very careful to evaluate the responses you're getting. So having said that, there's a time and a place for ChatGPT, and you always want to verify. So assume all responses are incorrect until proven otherwise. So this kind of leads into some of the limitations of generative AI. So certainly some strengths are that it's great for writing and wordsmithing. Not that we would go to ChatGPT to write our papers, but if you need to wordsmith a sentence or condense a paragraph into a sentence and you just need some help, then it can be useful for that. It can also be useful for generating or kickstarting ideas for a creative process, brainstorming research topics, help you with your citation styles. It will have a conversation with you in that language too. So because it sounds so confident, you just, again, always have to be careful. It can also help explain more complex terms, concepts in simple terms, but you have to remember that it can be wrong. So what are these problems? Like, it can be wrong, but why is that? Well, so the first one is that it has limited knowledge. They have data up until 2023 for the models that are pulling from the internet, but a lot of the data ends as of January 2022, particularly for the GPT 3.5. The other problems are with misinformation, and sometimes ChatGPT just makes stuff up, again, because it's using those tokens, and it's based on the probability of words and how those words should be returned to us. And so you can't, like, basically garbage in, garbage out. So I think these are called hallucinations, which many of you have probably heard. And so it's just, you have to be very careful because you could be getting incorrect information. And the model is always changing. So, you might put in a prompt one day and then the next day you'd put in the same prompt and you'll get a slightly different answer. The other issue is that because it has pulled from the internet, it does include problematic content like sexism, racism, homophobia, because it's pulling in from data sets from like the internet and Wikipedia. And so this can be leading to gaps in representation and missing perspectives. And it has a very English-speaking focus and Western focus. So it isn't completely unbiased at all. And then, of course, there are ethical concerns. environmental concerns. It uses a lot of energy. And I can't remember what the statistics were, but one of them had something to do with the amount of water being used to cool the servers for these AI tools was equivalent to providing water to the whole country of Ireland. So it is very energy intensive. And so for environmental concerns, that's something to think about when you're plugging in multiple prompts, is that it's contributing to our environmental issues. So when you are using it, some steps to take to make sure that you're not using any misinformation. You have to ask yourself, does it exist? Does each reference exist? And this involves going to Google or going to your library catalog and checking, looking up the title of that reference. You want to ask for more details. Could you provide an ISBN or ISSN for this publication? And was it properly summarized? Like, you want to consult the original material to see if it has been summarized correctly. So again, always be very cautious when using the information. There's this great chart by Alexander Tukalov. Sorry, I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly, but it basically is a flow chart for, is it safe to use ChatGPT for your task? And I mean, the first question is, does it matter if the output is true? So when you're doing research, that's often the case. However, there are instances where it doesn't, like if you're wordsmithing, if you need to create a citation style for your bibliography, you already have the correct text, but it might help with your citation style. So there are situations where it can be okay to use, but often, not as often do you answer yes. And so in many cases, it's not safe to use ChatGPT. What I have found in my experience is the best uses for ChatGPT are for wordsmithing tasks that don't involve searching. So it's great for brainstorming ideas, for identifying keywords and syntax to search in library databases, for summarizing and outlining information, not to cut and paste, but just sort of for your own information, and to kind of kickstart some ideas for a paper. It's also great for changing the writing level. If you want to change your writing level from a researcher to high school students, and also changing the writing style. Do you want to make something sound more professional, more academic? But again, using this carefully, because you also don't want to be, there are issues with how do you cite the fact that you've used AI, and these are issues that are coming up now, that if you use an AI tool to generate some text, then is that it, like, whose intellectual property is that? Okay. So now now that we've talked all about ChatGPT, generative AI, different, how to do prompts, now we're going to look at generative AI in the context of systematic searching. So before I even did this presentation, I did a little mini literature review back in May, just to see what tools are out there on systematic searching. Was there anything that is new or up and coming that, might be useful for this presentation, and also just to use in my day-to-day practice? So I conducted a search strategy and just wanted to highlight, shout out to my colleague Dagmara Wojecki and Janice Kung. They developed an artificial intelligence search filter, which I used in sets 5 and 6. and I searched Ovid Medline and Google Scholar, and just looking at, you know, any articles that have used a tool for searching or anything about searching in artificial intelligence or generative AI tools. So in the end, I found the search retrieved 181 and 13 publications were looked at, the full text. According to, I can't pronounce this name, but Trackle, there were a lot of inaccuracies and reference inaccuracies, and the DOI was the most common inaccurate component. The author name, publication and year, and reference title were often the types of pieces of information that were inaccurate in outputs of these tools. I think in particular for this one, it was ChatGPT, but they also looked at Bing Chat and Bard. So there was just a lot of inaccuracy, which, you know, made me feel very unconfident about ever using it for citations. So what I found was the prompts for search elements were looked at, and there was some studies that looked at prompts for synonyms, Boolean strings, identifying errors in the strategy, identifying databases, translating to other databases, and identification of seed articles, and citation chaining. They also looked at the number of correctly identified citations on a simple topic or concept from the AI-created search, and the number of correctly identified studies to answer a clinical question. But there were a lot of limitations. I couldn't even really synthesize any of these papers. Many didn't indicate which version of ChatGPT they were using. There were no consistencies across the tools or papers in terms of methodology. So I was just, if anything, I just got the previous types of prompts, ideas for the previous types of prompts, or prompts. So the implications that for AI for information specialists right now, in any case, are that we need to become experts in prompt engineering, and that companies are hiring librarians for this role. So there really wasn't much except some ideas for prompts and the fact that we need to be good at it in some fashion. And these are the references if anyone wants to have these. I'll be circulating the slides after. So yeah, so it wasn't overwhelmingly helpful, with the exception that I was able to find some categories of prompts to try. And so what I did was I decided to try a set of prompts for a review that I had done. Well, not I had done. I'd done the search for many years ago. It was simple. I had a simple intervention, a simple population. And so I just wanted to try these types of prompts and see how ChatGPT did. And I was doing this in GPT-4 because it wasn't possible to do it in 3.5. So I've been paying $20 US a month to do this, which is a small investment, but still, just for those of you who are wondering if you can do it in 3.5. Okay. So the first prompt was, I am a research librarian. Please translate the research question, how effective is melatonin for the treatment of sleep disorders in adults, into searchable concepts using the PICO framework. And so I did this, and, you know, it wasn't too bad. It has, like, based on the PICO framework, your search query could be structured as follows, and it even provided a little sample search strategy. But as professional information specialists, I know that that search strategy wouldn't be sufficient. So my next question was, now, identify synonyms for the first concept. And the first concept was the population. And so the first concept, it actually listed adults and and the sleep disorders. So synonyms for older adults and synonyms for sleep disorders. So I was kind of impressed that I recognized that. Then I asked, can you please identify synonyms for the intervention concept, melatonin? So it provided the chemical name, pineal hormone, circadian hormone, different forms of melatonin, and derivatives and related compounds. Then I asked, can you combine the population terms into a Boolean phrase? And so it correctly combined the adult terms with synonyms and ORed them, and then ANDed them with the sleep disorder terms, which were then all ORed. Which I was also, okay, it knows Boolean logic. This is good. Please follow the same 3 steps for the intervention concept. And so the intervention concept had been established after the first prompt. So then it ORed all the melatonin terms here correctly. Now combine each concept with AND. So it's taken the population terms and put brackets around accordingly, and then combine that with the melatonin terms. So far so good. I know this isn't a perfect search, but we're taking steps. So next prompt, I think that was, yes. So translate the search below to Ovid Medline syntax. So it did translate the search to Ovid Medline syntax, and I see it also added in some subject headings: adults, young adults, sleep disorders intrinsic, sleep apnea syndromes. So it actually added some subject headings, which was very surprising. Please remove redundant terms and use Ovid adjacency operators from the full search query. So it did do this, but a little bit differently than I had expected. It combined, so it ORed middle age and then put adjacency 3 adults, but the brackets and the placement of the syntax isn't correct. And I think that, and then one other place it did melatonin adjacent supplements. So it needed some tweaking still. There were some errors here. But then I asked, please check the search strategy for errors. And it did mention that, let me just see here, middle-aged adults. Again, it didn't really pick up the fact that middle-aged adults, that this phrase was incorrect, like it needs an adjacency. I think it's probably better to use the brackets with this one. But it did, pointed out things like how explode is very broad. And for coverage, it may, you might want to look at that again. So it was pointing things out that were, things that we as information specialists might be interested in. Still not perfect, but, it's trying. Then I prompted it to please translate the above search string into EBSCO-CINAHL. And so it did translate using the EBSCO-CINAHL syntax. However, we don't know if all of the subject headings are correct or not. That would have to be checked. So those were just some prompts that I tried, but I feel like it was a very good start, especially, if you're really rushed for time. This could be an option for generating a search string and kind of getting started on it and having something to go with. But, as far as the syntax goes, as far as, the adjacency operators and checking for the subject headings, you're still going to have to do that separately. So basically the summary of these prompt types for search elements that worked were identifying the concepts, identifying the synonyms, correct use of Boolean strings, some identification of errors in the strategy. I know that identification of databases can be done successfully, translating to databases with caution, also identification of seed articles and citation chaining are all types of prompts that you could use for your search strategy. So using generative AI for this search strategy development, I mean, implications for information specialists are you're not going to lose your job. For one thing, we're not there yet. But it does help with efficiency and speed. I mean, and it does have the capacity to enhance your search strategies, and is making it more accessible to perhaps people that aren't as familiar with searching, with the caveat that they still need to have a librarian or someone check their search for errors, as the errors, we're just still not there. We need, and under the challenges here, we have like accuracy and recall. We still don't know. I haven't done tests of a ChatGPT generated search versus my own search. Did the ChatGPT come up with more accurate results or more precise results compared to the human search? So we still need human oversight to check for all those little errors that only information specialists and experts in database searching know about. And we do have to check for bias in terms of the subject headings that it may, or the terms it may be suggesting, and those ethical considerations as well, and just keeping in mind the environmental impact of when you are putting in these prompts, that it is generating a lot of energy that has an impact on our environment. There are some future opportunities with ChatGPT. So up on the upper left corner, there are, you can explore GPTs. And so that's how I discovered, for example, Consensus or Scholar GPT. And with the paid version, you can create your own GPT using prompts and make it publicly available. I feel like this one needs testing. I would love to try it out. It's just a matter of having time, but there could be a lot of potential for this. And I wished I'd had time to kind of explore it beforehand, but I just needed more and I didn't have it. So there are lots of other generative AI tools out there, and how you use them will depend a lot on what task you want the tool to do. So some of the main tasks are wordsmithing that don't involve any searching. There are some tasks that involve searching the internet, and then some tasks that involve scholarly information. And so the word tasks that don't involve searching, tools such as ChatGPT. Also a great tool is Perplexity AI, great for both searching and wordsmithing. Microsoft Copilot and Google Gemini, good for wordsmithing. Tasks that involve searching the internet, Perplexity, Copilot, and Gemini. And I always prefer Perplexity. This is where I find it absolutely fantastic for finding gray literature and seed articles. The data sources from Perplexity are Bing, academic journals, research papers, social media platforms, news articles. The free version uses a model based on ChatGPT, but it includes citations from the internet, and it's in real time, which is nice compared to GPT 3.5. You're getting the more recent information, and Perplexity also provides direct links to the source, so you can check it immediately to see if it exists. Tasks that involve searching for scholarly information, and that actually can synthesize the information. Again, these are tools that are trying, not necessarily succeeding, but getting there. Elicit or assistant by site and consensus. These search the Semantic Scholar database that has 200+ million scientific papers, but we still recommend going to your library databases and Google Scholar for this information, because these tools aren't fully developed yet. So I've just made a little chart on recommended tools by task, and ChatGPT is in the wordsmithing. Like, if you don't go beyond wordsmithing or generating text with ChatGPT. I've included a generative AI product tracker. This has like a comprehensive list of all the AI tools out there for you to take a look at. And now I think we are at questions. So before we have questions, though, I just wanted to point out, thank you to Janice Kung of Jeffrey and Robert Sperber Health Sciences Library and the U of A Library Artificial Working Group. They shared many of their slides and content, so thank you very much. And there's just some tools and activities to try on your own here. If you want to try prompt generation, the tools, I've got a Google spreadsheet shared sheet, and you can make a copy of that and just start experimenting. And maybe we could all meet up again someday and compare notes. So now I'll just go back to the questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Lisa, for this informative and very empowering presentation. You've actually answered a lot of the questions that I had about AI and searching today. If I can hold you for one moment, we do have a few questions in the chat. So I know we are sort of at time, but I would like to take just a couple of minutes to go through some of these questions. So we've got a question here, and I'll just read it out. Expert searchers know that the C and the O, so comparator and outcome concepts from PICO, are rarely used in systematic review searches. Does ChatGPT know this, or do users need to tell it that through prompting? Do we need to prompt it?
I would recommend prompting. Yeah, like you always have to prompt. And I think you would also be able to tell by the prompts that you do to suggest the concepts, create a search strategy. You'll see what it knows. And so, you know, you can do some tests and ask, but when in doubt, prompt.
Great, thank you. And I'll ask one more question, Lisa. So someone's asking, curious to know if you or anyone watching has compared Scopus AI results with a systematic search you've created. And I guess that could also translate as well to ChatGPT if you've sort of tested the outcome or the success of those searches.
No, I would love to have time to do this. So I will note it as future primary research for me or for whoever wants to collaborate. There's just so many opportunities for research in this area. And you know, it's moving so quickly that by the time you think of a topic, someone's already published on it. Yeah, no, I haven't had time to look into that. But but if you do, let me know.
I think we'll be hearing more about this in future. So great question. And maybe time for just one last question today. Someone writes, in the past, I have found that ChatGPT hallucinates mesh headings. Has this been your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you have to check the mesh headings always. So yeah, like it's not, I'd say it helps with some synonyms and the structure and the syntax, and then you need to go in and perhaps fill in that blank, and with the, if it has a slash there for Ovid, you would have to put the actual subject heading in. But it's worth testing in some of the other more live real-time tools like Perplexity. I would be interested to know if one of these other tools would generate the correct mesh heading, but we don't know yet. Another research project.
So lots of great research ideas are being sparked here. I want to thank everyone today for their participation in the chat and for joining the webinar today. A recording will be made available. And again, I want to thank Lisa Chosfold for her engaging discussion today. Thank you very much, Lisa. I think we will now close the webinar and hope to see you all again very soon, and hopefully with more research in this area. So thank you all very much.